The world around her was soundless, an endless, heavy silence that pressed against her ears until even her heartbeat felt too loud. Lena Moore's lashes fluttered open, scraping frost from her skin. For a moment, she couldn't remember where she was. Her body felt pinned, her breath shallow, each inhale slicing like glass through her chest. Then came the cold. Not the kind that bites, but the kind that devours. It crawled up her arms, into her ribs, down to the marrow of her bones. She tried to move, but her hands met smooth metal walls slick with frost. The surface was narrow, curved, confining. Her knees hit the other side within inches. Panic rushed in like a tide. Her throat constricted as she whispered, "Hello?" No answer. Only the faint hum of machinery somewhere above. She reached out again, fingers trembling. Ice crystals broke off beneath her nails. The air smelled metallic, old, and sealed. A soft realization crept in. She was inside something. A box. A chest. Her breath hitched. A freezer. The word cracked through her mind like a lightning strike. She jerked upward, slamming her head against the lid. Pain burst behind her eyes. "No, no, no," she whispered, voice shaking. She pounded the walls, but the thudding only echoed back, muffled and small. The lid didn't move. For a few moments her thoughts spiraled in frantic fragments. How long have I been here? Why can't I remember? The last thing she could recall was the kitchen. Ethan's voice, sharp, low, controlled, cutting through her as she tried to explain. A spilled glass of wine, the look in his eyes, cold and empty. Then, nothing. Her stomach twisted. She remembered his words. "You never learn when to stop talking, Lena." She swallowed hard, forcing her trembling fingers to explore the tiny space. Her fingertips brushed something soft. Her own sweater, frozen stiff. Her hair stuck to the side of her face in brittle strands. The temperature felt below freezing, even breathing hurt. She tucked her arms close, trying to preserve warmth that was already gone. Minutes passed, or maybe hours. There was no way to tell. Her breath clouded the darkness, and she began counting. 1, 2, 3, anything to keep her mind from fracturing. When her hand brushed the corner again, she felt a faint vibration from above. The compressor. The machine was still running. That meant power. That meant Ethan was still here. Her mind replayed flashes. Ethan standing by the counter, the half-empty bottle of scotch, his hand tightening around her wrist. "I'm done with your lies," he'd said, too calm, too deliberate. Lena pressed her forehead against the icy wall, trying to think past the fear. If Ethan had locked her in here, he'd done it to make her disappear, to silence her. But why? Tears burned her cheeks only to freeze halfway down. The pain snapped something inside her into focus. She refused to die like this, alone, voiceless, a ghost sealed in ice. Her hand traced upward, feeling for the latch. Nothing. The lock was outside. She let out a broken sound between a sob and a growl. "You won't win," she whispered to no one. Her breathing grew shallow. The air felt thinner now. She turned her face toward the tiny seam near the lid where a faint draft touched her skin. She inhaled slowly through it, forcing herself to stay calm. "Think, Lena. Just think." Her pulse steadied slightly. She remembered Ethan's morning routine, the sound of his truck starting, the way he left his phone charging in the kitchen. If she could make noise, if anyone passed by, someone might hear. She balled her fist and began tapping. Once, twice, then harder. A steady rhythm. Tap, tap, tap. Her knuckles split, blood smearing across the frost. Still, she didn't stop. In the silence between each strike, her mind filled with a single image. Ethan's eyes staring down at her last night, glinting like shards of glass. Then, faintly, from somewhere outside the box, came a sound. Footsteps on concrete. Her breath caught. The footsteps paused, just beyond her reach. She froze, every nerve screaming. "Ethan?" she whispered. The footsteps turned, then faded. The compressor hummed louder, drowning everything. The light behind her eyelids dimmed to black again, but the thought pulsed through her mind like fire. Someone's out there, and if she could survive the cold long enough, someone might hear her. A week earlier, the Moore house looked like the portrait of quiet suburban perfection. The lawn was trimmed, the porch lights glowed warm against the falling dusk, and from the street, the sound of soft jazz floated through half-open windows. Inside, Lena set the dinner table, smiling faintly as she adjusted the silverware. Her hands trembled slightly, though she hid it well. Ethan Moore entered the room with his usual polished calm, his tie loosened but posture rigid. "Smells good," he said, kissing her cheek without really touching her. She caught the faint scent of scotch on his breath. "It's your favorite," she replied, serving the roast. "Thought we could have a quiet night." He smiled, but his eyes flickered toward the empty wine bottle on the counter. "You already started drinking?" Her voice faltered. "Just a glass." He didn't answer. The silence that followed was practiced, familiar. The clink of cutlery against porcelain filled the air as both pretended to eat. From the outside, it could have passed for an ordinary dinner, yet every word they didn't say pressed like weight between them. Across the street, Mrs. Keller sat on her porch, knitting. She glanced toward the Moore's house, her expression tightening. She had seen Lena's smile before, thin, polite, the kind that hides bruises too deep for skin. Inside, Ethan broke the silence. The bank called again. Lena froze. "I thought you handled that." "I did, but they're questioning the transfer." His fork scraped against the plate. "You withdrew $5,000 last month. Care to explain?" Her pulse spiked. "I told you. It was for my mother's treatment. She needed—" "She needed nothing," he interrupted sharply. "You don't make financial decisions without me." Lena lowered her eyes. "It's my money too, Ethan." He leaned forward, voice quiet but lethal. "Not anymore." For a moment, the room seemed to hold its breath. The jazz track ended, leaving only the hum of the refrigerator. Lena's gaze drifted toward it, a small, harmless appliance now, but something in its low vibration made her stomach twist. Later that night, after Ethan had gone to his office, Lena sat alone on the couch, staring at the flickering TV. Her phone buzzed with a message. "Are you okay?" From Ryan, Ethan's business partner. She didn't reply. She simply placed the phone face down and stared at her reflection in the black screen. Upstairs, Ethan listened to the creak of the stairs, the faint clink of glass as she poured another drink. His jaw tightened. To him, control wasn't cruelty. It was order. She was unpredictable, emotional, careless. He had to manage her, to fix her, before she ruined everything. Outside, Mrs. Keller heard raised voices again. She moved closer to her window, notebook in hand. "Don't talk to me like that!" Lena's voice, raw, breaking. "I'll talk to you however I damn please," Ethan snarled. "You think you can make a fool out of me?" Then, silence, followed by the sound of shattering glass. Mrs. Keller jotted the date and time in her small leather journal. 3rd fight this week. She hesitated before writing the last line. Something isn't right in that house. Inside, Lena knelt on the floor, gathering shards from the broken glass, her fingers bleeding. Ethan stood over her, breathing hard. "Look what you make me do," he muttered, as though the words absolved him. She didn't look up. "You need help, Ethan." He turned sharply, his shadow stretching long against the wall. You're the one who needs help. When the front door finally slammed, Lena exhaled, trembling. She wrapped her hand in a towel and whispered to herself, "Just one more week. I'll leave after the conference." Her reflection in the dark window looked pale and determined. Somewhere inside her, something had started to shift, fear turning into resolve. Across the street, Mrs. Keller closed her notebook, unaware that what she'd written down that night would later become evidence. The house fell silent again, the kind of silence that follows a storm but promises another. And in the kitchen, the refrigerator hummed steadily, cold, constant, waiting. The house glowed with artificial warmth that night, every light turned on as if brightness could disguise the rot underneath. The table was set immaculately, candles, crystal glasses, folded linen napkins. Lena moved through the dining room with quiet precision, her expression polite, detached. She'd done this many times before, played the role of the perfect wife while Ethan performed the charming husband. The doorbell rang. Ethan straightened his tie, flashing her a tight smile. "Remember," he said softly, "tonight's important. Don't embarrass me." She didn't answer, only stepped aside as two of his business partners entered. Ryan and Mr. Delaney, both in tailored suits and polite smiles that didn't quite reach their eyes. Ethan poured drinks, laughter filling the air in carefully measured doses. Lena watched from the kitchen doorway, her hand wrapped in a faint bandage from last night's broken glass. Every gesture Ethan made, the firm handshake, the confident grin, felt like a performance choreographed to perfection. When she joined them, Ryan's gaze lingered on her just a second too long. "Lena, you look beautiful," he said, trying to sound casual. Ethan's smile froze. "She cleans up well," he replied lightly, but the undertone sliced deep. They all laughed, but Lena's stomach tightened. She sat down, forcing a smile. Throughout dinner, Ethan's jokes grew sharper, his tone more possessive. Each time she spoke, he interrupted, correcting her, mocking her opinions with that same controlled charm. "So, Lena," Delaney asked at one point, "do you help Ethan with the business?" "She tries," Ethan said before she could answer. "But spreadsheets aren't her thing. She's more emotional." The men chuckled. Lena's fork paused mid-air. For a second she considered saying something, anything, but swallowed the words. Instead she looked straight at Ethan and smiled thinly. "Yes," she said quietly. "Someone has to feel something in this house." Ryan glanced at her, an uneasy sympathy in his eyes. Ethan's jaw tightened, but he masked it with a laugh. Always the dramatist. Dinner dragged on until the plates were empty and the wine nearly gone. When Ryan and Delaney finally left, Lena saw the shift, the moment Ethan's charm collapsed into something darker. He closed the door behind them with deliberate calm, locking it. The house fell silent except for the ticking clock. "What was that performance?" he asked. Lena set down a glass. "Performance? You mean pretending to be your puppet?" His expression hardened. "Don't start." "I'm not starting. I'm ending this game, Ethan." Her voice trembled but held steady. "You humiliate me in front of people, then expect me to smile. I'm done." He stepped closer, towering over her. "Done? With what, exactly?" "With you controlling every part of my life." His eyes flashed. "Don't say things you'll regret." "I already regret everything," she whispered. For a moment, the air between them froze, heavy, electric. Then Ethan's voice dropped, cold and cutting. "You think I don't know about you and Ryan?" Her eyes widened. "What are you talking about?" "Don't lie to me, Lena. I saw the messages. Are you okay?" "That's not business talk." "It was concern," she shouted. "Because you scare me." The words hung in the air, raw and jagged. Ethan's face twisted with something between rage and disbelief. He turned, grabbing the nearest glass and hurling it against the wall. It shattered, wine bleeding down the wallpaper like spilled blood. Lena flinched but didn't move. "You need help," she said quietly. He stared at her, breathing hard. "You want to leave me? You won't." Her hand went to her wedding ring, twisting it nervously. "Watch me." He lunged forward, grabbing her wrist. The ring slipped, clinking against the tile floor. They both froze, staring at the small gold circle glinting under the kitchen light. Ethan's grip loosened. For an instant, silence returned, fragile as glass. Then his expression hardened again, his voice lowering to something almost calm. "You'll regret that, Lena." She stepped back slowly, hand trembling. "Not as much as you will." He smiled, a hollow, chilling curve of the mouth. "We'll see." She turned away, leaving the ring where it fell. Behind her, Ethan bent down, picking it up with care, his reflection warped in the metal's curve. The light flickered above him, dimming for just a moment before returning to normal. Outside, the neighborhood was quiet, only the faint hum of crickets breaking the stillness. Inside, Lena shut herself in the bedroom, unaware that Ethan remained awake downstairs, the ring clenched tight in his hand, a plan already forming behind those cold blue eyes. The night after the dinner was quiet. Too quiet. The kind of silence that presses against the walls, thick and waiting. Ethan sat alone in the dim kitchen, Lena's ring glinting beside his glass. He turned it slowly between his fingers, the metal catching the flicker of the overhead light. Upstairs, Lena moved softly, packing a small bag. She didn't care if he heard this time. She was leaving. Her hands trembled, but her resolve was clear. The broken glass, the humiliation, the threats. She couldn't live another day inside his cage. Downstairs, Ethan poured, yet himself another drink. Then another. Each sip dulled the edges of his thoughts, but his anger pulsed beneath it, steady and alive. He could still hear her voice from the argument. "You scare me." It echoed in his skull, twisting into something poisonous. He glanced at the counter where the bottle of sleeping pills sat, half empty. A slow, methodical calm overtook him. He poured 2 glasses of wine, dropping crushed tablets into one. The liquid shimmered faintly as the powder dissolved. When Lena finally came down, her coat over her arm, her eyes were swollen but steady. "I'm done, Ethan," she said quietly. "I'm leaving tonight." He smiled gently, almost kindly. "You should at least have a drink before you go. We can end it civilly." She hesitated. It wasn't like him to be calm, but exhaustion made her reckless. "Fine," she whispered, taking the glass. They sat across from each other, candlelight flickering between them. For a brief, fragile moment, it almost looked like peace. Then Lena's vision blurred. The room tilted sideways. Her fingers went limp around the stem of the glass, and the last thing she saw was Ethan watching her, not angry, not even satisfied, just eerily composed. The sound of her body hitting the floor broke the stillness. He stood, exhaled, and whispered, "You never listen." The next minutes moved like a distorted dream. He dragged her across the hardwood floor, her hair leaving faint trails against the polished surface. The soft thud of her body hitting each step echoed through the empty house as he pulled her toward the garage. The freezer sat in the corner, large, white, ordinary. The hum of the motor filled the air. Ethan opened the lid, frost spilling out like ghostly smoke. He paused, staring down at her face. Her lips were pale, parted slightly. He brushed a strand of hair from her forehead, a twisted tenderness crossing his features. "Yai, you'll wake up," he murmured. "But by then, maybe you'll understand." He lifted her into the chest, her limbs folding awkwardly, her wrist knocking against the edge with a soft crack. He flinched but didn't stop. The inside of the freezer glowed faintly blue, sterile and cold. Her breath came shallowly, still alive. He hesitated, fingers tightening on the lid. "This is your fault," he whispered, as if convincing himself. "You pushed me here." The hinge creaked as he lowered the lid. For a heartbeat, there was only the sound of her faint breathing. Then came the final thud as it closed. The sound echoed through the garage like a door sealing a tomb. He stood motionless, staring at the white surface. His hand lingered on the latch, trembling. Then, with one decisive motion, he snapped the lock into place. 5 days, he whispered, his voice calm now, almost soothing. 5 days will be enough to make you quiet. He turned off the light and walked away, leaving the hum of the freezer to fill the darkness. In the silence that followed, a faint tap echoed from inside. Unconscious, yet fighting, breath catching in frozen air. Ethan didn't hear it. He was already climbing the stairs, rehearsing the story he'd tell. Upstairs, the house looked peaceful again. The wine glasses still sat on the table, one half empty, the other overturned. Outside, the night deepened, black, endless, and cold. The darkness pressed against her eyes before she even opened them. A dull ache throbbed in her skull, her lips numb, her fingers stiff as if they no longer belonged to her. For a few disoriented seconds, Lena thought she was still dreaming. Then the cold hit her. It crawled under her skin, sank into her lungs, and jolted her into full consciousness. She tried to move, but her arms hit something solid. Her knee brushed a metal wall. Panic surged. The sound that escaped her throat was small and broken, swallowed instantly by the confined air. Then memory crashed over her. Ethan's voice, the whine, the dizzying blur of falling. Her breath came fast, shallow, and painful. No, oh no. The word echoed in her mind, but there was no one to hear it. She pressed her palms against the lid, pushing with every bit of strength left in her. It didn't budge. The realization struck. She was inside the freezer. Ethan had locked her in. Her pulse pounded in her ears, louder than the faint hum of the motor. She started counting. Numbers became her anchor. 1, 2, 3. She lost track somewhere past 60, her voice rasping into silence. Every second stretched like an eternity. Images flickered through her frozen mind. Her wedding day under soft sunlight, Ethan smiling as he placed the ring on her finger. "I'll always protect you," he'd said. She almost laughed at the memory, the sound bitter and weak. Her body trembled violently. She pressed her hands together, blowing warm air into them, only to feel it vanish instantly in the frigid space. She could already feel the early sting of frostbite creeping into her fingertips. The air was thin, but as she shifted her head, she felt something faint, a whisper of movement near her face. She tilted toward it and found a narrow seam between the lid and the rim. A thin, steady trickle of air brushed against her skin. Hope flickered. She pressed her lips close to it, drawing in slow, shallow breaths. "Don't waste it. Don't panic." Her mother's voice echoed faintly in her memory. "When you can't fight, you think. Thinking keeps you alive." She tried to think, to stay conscious, to remember warmth. She pictured sunlight, beaches from childhood summers, her mother's soft laugh. But the images kept freezing, breaking apart, replaced by Ethan's face. The way his eyes looked when love had turned into ownership. Her chest tightened. Tears welled, but froze before they could fall. "I'm not going to die here," she whispered. Her voice sounded foreign, cracked. "You don't get to end me like this." She began counting agitiyad, and slower this time, in rhythm with each shallow breath. The repetition steadied her. Time lost meaning. Only survival mattered. Somewhere between the counting and the shivering, she realized something strange. The cold was no longer just killing her. It was keeping her awake, alert, defiant. She pressed her hand flat against the icy wall, feeling her heartbeat throb faintly through her palm. "You can't freeze me out," she murmured. The freezer had become her coffin and her cradle, death and rebirth in one breath. Her vision blurred, but her thoughts sharpened. She traced the seam again, memorizing its position, her body imprinting it like a map. If she survived the night, she would find a way to push that lid open. The hum of the compressor deepened. Somewhere above, faint footsteps passed, or maybe she imagined them. Still, she whispered into the dark, "Someone will hear me." Her words vanished into frost, but she clung to them like a promise. Then she curled tighter, conserving what warmth she could, her breath steady through the air gap. The darkness seemed endless, but she wasn't broken yet. Outside the freezer, unseen, the garage light flickered once and went out, leaving everything in silence except the low, steady hum that kept her alive. The darkness had become her companion. By the third day, Lena no longer shivered. Her body had numbed, her mind floating somewhere between clarity and delirium. Every breath through the narrow seam felt like stealing air from another world. She had stopped counting hours. It only made the silence louder. Then she heard it. A faint sound from beyond the icy walls, footsteps on concrete. Slow, cautious. Her eyes snapped open. For a second, she thought she was hallucinating again. But then came the low murmur of voices, muffled by the freezer's thick walls. Her heart kicked painfully to life. Someone was here. She pressed her ear against the lid. One of the voices was unmistakable. Ethan. The other was deeper, uncertain. Ryan. "Didn't expect you to drop? Bye," Ethan said, his tone carefully even. "Yeah, well," Ryan replied. "You've been off the radar. Thought I'd check in. You missed the meeting Monday." Lena's pulse quickened. She opened her mouth to scream, but the sound barely escaped her frozen throat. Desperation took over. She balled her fist and began tapping against the wall. Once, twice, 3 times. A steady rhythm. "Help me." Outside, Ryan paused. "What was that?" Ethan froze. "What was what?" "That sound. Thought I heard knocking." "Old pipes," Ethan said quickly. "Garage has been making noise all week." Lena pounded again, harder this time, ignoring the pain splintering through her hand. Her knuckles burned, her blood smearing faintly on the frost. Ryan's footsteps moved closer. "It's coming from over here," he said. Ethan stepped in front of the freezer, blocking it. "Seriously, it's nothing. You know how these old houses are." Through the thick insulation, Lena could hear the strain in Ethan's voice, the barely contained panic. She froze, terrified that he might realize what she was doing. Ryan hesitated. "You sweating, man? You look pale." Ethan forced a laugh. "Didn't sleep much. Been working in here all morning." "Working?" Ryan echoed. "In your garage? With the door closed?" There was a pause. Lena could hear Ryan shift his weight. She prayed he'd push further, open the lid, find her. Her entire body trembled with hope so fragile it hurt to breathe. But Ethan spoke again, calm now, the tone of a practiced liar. "You worry too much. Look, I've got some things to finish up. Rain check on that drink?" Ryan didn't answer right away. "Yeah," he said finally, voice unreadable. "Sure. Another time." His footsteps retreated toward the door. Lena's heart dropped with each fading step. She let out a choked sob, banging one last time, her voice cracking. "Please." But the sound never reached him. Outsit. Ryan stood by his car, frowning, something in his gut twisted. The smell of bleach from the garage, Ethan's shaky smile, the sweat on his brow despite the cool air. He opened his car door, then paused, glancing back once more at the house. Inside, Ethan leaned against the freezer, breathing hard. "You just don't quit, do you?" he muttered to the box beneath his hand. The metal was cold under his palm, a pulse of life faintly thudding beneath. He pressed down until the vibration stopped. Lena went still, conserving what little air she had left. She couldn't afford another mistake. But even through her haze of fear and exhaustion, she clung to one thought. Ryan had heard something. He doubted Ethan. That doubt was her only chance. She closed her eyes, whispering into the darkness, "Come back." Outside, the sound of Ryan's car engine faded into the distance, leaving the garage wrapped in silence once again. Ethan turned off the light, locking the door behind him. The hum of the freezer deepened, steady and merciless. Inside, Lena kept breathing, slow, shallow, alive. Waiting. Time had dissolved into a blur of cold and heartbeat. Lena wasn't sure if it was morning or night anymore, only that the air was thinning, her breaths coming in ragged, painful pulls. Every second felt like the world was closing in on her. Her body trembled uncontrollably, lips cracked, eyes barely open. She'd stopped crying hours ago. Tears froze before they could fall. She pressed her cheek against the icy wall, whispering to herself, "You're not dying here. Not like this." That's when her fingers brushed something hard, something metallic. Her ring. Ethan's wedding ring, the one he had dropped the night of the argument, was now fused in frost along the inner corner of the freezer. She didn't know how it had ended up there. Maybe it had slipped from his pocket. Maybe fate had left it behind for her to find. Lena curled her stiff fingers around it. The metal bit into her skin, but pain meant she was still alive. With what little strength she had, she began, scraping at the ice along the lid's seam. Each movement sent daggers of agony through her arm, but she didn't stop. Scrape, rest, breathe, scrape again. The sound was faint but rhythmic, the pulse of survival. Images of her mother's face flickered behind her eyelids, her voice from years ago echoing, "When you feel trapped, find a crack of light, no matter how small." Lena clung to that. The freezer wasn't just her prison anymore, it was her test. Hours passed. Her nails tore, her knuckles split. The ring slipped from her fingers, but she caught it again, pressing it hard into the ice. Finally, the corner of the lid shifted. Barely, but enough for a sliver of air to rush through. The difference was instant. Warmth. Life. She gasped, inhaling greedily, her lungs burning. "Come on," she whispered. "Come on." With a desperate cry that echoed inside the metal tomb, she shoved with her shoulder. The lid creaked, resisted, then finally gave way with a groan that sounded like thunder. Cold air spilled out into the garage, followed by a single trembling hand reaching up. Lena pulled herself free, collapsing onto the concrete. Her body hit the ground hard, but the sting of it was proof. She was out. She lay there, half-conscious, her breath fogging in uneven bursts. The world around her tilted and swayed. The garage light flickered weakly overhead. Everything smelled of oil, bleach, and decay. She tried to crawl toward the door, her palms leaving faint streaks of blood behind. Her voice was barely a whisper. "Help. Please." Her vision blurred. For a moment she thought she saw Ethan standing by the doorway again, that familiar silhouette. Panic surged, until she realized the light was coming from outside. Headlights, the sound of tires on gravel. A car pulling up. Lena blinked hard, forcing her eyes to focus. The shape in the headlights wasn't Ethan. It was Ryan. His "See." Our door opened, and she could just make out his startled voice shouting her name. Relief and disbelief collided in her chest. Her lips moved, but no sound came. She tried to lift her hand to signal him, but her strength was gone. The last thing she saw before darkness took her again was Ryan's face, pale, shocked, and running toward her. The garage filled with footsteps and the echo of her name. Then, silence. Outside, the headlights stayed on, cutting through the suburban night like a blade. Somewhere, not far behind, another set of tires rolled onto the same road. Ryan's breath came in sharp bursts as he knelt beside Lena's limp body. Her skin was ice cold, her lips pale blue, but when he pressed two trembling fingers to her neck, there it was. A pulse, faint, fragile, but there. Jesus Christ. Lena, stay with me, he muttered, his voice cracking as he pulled off his jacket and wrapped it around her shaking frame. Her eyelids fluttered open for a second. He saw the frost clinging to her lashes, the split on her lip, the terror still frozen in her expression. Ethan, she whispered weakly. Ryan's blood ran cold. What did he do to you? She tried to speak, but only a soft rasp escaped. Then her body went slack again. Ryan scrambled for his phone, fingers barely working. 911, he gasped. There's a woman. She's freezing to death. She's barely breathing. Please, hurry! The operator's calm voice guided him through every second that felt like an hour. Keep her warm. Do not move her too much. Help is on the way. Within minutes, the distant wail of sirens sliced through the quiet neighborhood. The flashing red and blue lights reflected off the garage windows, painting the night in panic. Ryan backed away as paramedics rushed in, lifting Lena carefully onto a stretcher. He followed their movements, numb, watching as they covered her with heated blankets and oxygen lines. He caught a glimpse of her face once more before they loaded her into the ambulance. Her fingers twitched, still clutching something. A ring. Ryan wallowed hard. He knew what that ring meant. The paramedics sped away, leaving the smell of exhaust and the echo of sirens behind. Ryan stood there, breath visible in the cool air, trying to make sense of what he'd seen. Then, headlights appeared again at the end of the street. Ethan's car. Ryan froze, every instinct screaming to leave. But he didn't. He wanted to see his face. Ethan stepped out slowly, confusion plastered across his features as he took in the flashing lights, the open garage, the chaos left behind. What the hell happened here? He asked, his voice trembling, perfectly rehearsed. Ryan said nothing. He just stared at him. Ethan walked closer, his gaze darting from Ryan to the marks on the ground. The blood smears, the faint drag lines. Ryan? He said carefully. Why are you here? I could ask you the same thing, Ryan replied. I came to check on you, and found her, in your garage. Ethan's jaw tightened. Her? What are you talking about? Lena, Ryan said, voice sharp now. She was in your freezer, Ethan. For a split second, Ethan's mask cracked, his pupils narrowing, his breath catching. But then it was gone. He forced a shaky laugh. That's insane. You think I put my wife in a freezer? She's been unstable for weeks, Ryan. You know how she gets. Unstable? Ryan repeated. You mean terrified? Ethan took a step closer, lowering his voice. You don't understand what she's like when she spirals. She locked herself in the garage, probably fainted. I've been out clearing my head. Cut it, Ryan snapped. You're lying. Before Ethan could respond, a new voice cut through the tension. I knew something was wrong. They both turned. Mrs. Keller stood near her porch, her robe wrapped tight, a notebook clutched to her chest. Her gray hair glowed silver under the streetlight. "I heard everything that night," she said firmly. "The shouting, the glass breaking, and I saw you dragging something." Ethan's face drained of color. You don't know what you saw." "Oh, I know," she said, her voice cold as the night air. "I've been writing it all down." She held up the small leather journal. "Every sound, every time, every scream." Ryan's stare met hers, and something unspoken passed between them. The truth was surfacing. Ethan exhaled shakily, realizing the walls were closing in. "You're making a mistake," he muttered, but his hands trembled. Mrs. Keller's eyes narrowed. "The only mistake was trusting you." Somewhere down the street, the ambulance siren wailed again, distant now, carrying Lena toward a hospital, toward truth. Ethan's gaze followed the sound, his mask slipping once more into something dark, unreadable. "She's not going to wake up," he said softly, almost to himself. Ryan took a step forward. "You'd better pray she does." The night hung heavy between them, the cold wind carrying the faint scent of bleach and fear. The interrogation room was small, gray, and silent, except for the steady hum of the overhead light. Ethan sat across from Detective Carla Reyes, his hands folded neatly, the picture of composure. But the sweat on his temple betrayed him. A single red light blinked on the recording camera. "State your name for the record," Carla said, her voice calm but sharp. "Ethan Moore." Her gaze didn't waver. "Ethan, do you understand why you're here?" He gave a small shrug, forcing a faint smile. "Because my wife's hurt. I already told the officers what happened. It was an accident." Carla leaned back in her chair, studying him. "An accident," she repeated softly. "You expect me to believe your wife somehow locked herself in a freezer?" He didn't answer. Carla opened a file on the table. Inside were still photos, grainy security footage recovered from Ethan's own home cameras. In each frame, the truth sat frozen. One showed Lena lying motionless on the garage floor. Another caught the edge of Ethan's shoulder as he closed the lid. Ethan's jaw tightened. "You didn't know about the backup system," Carla said. "The one that uploads automatically to the cloud, even when you deleted the main footage." She slid a photo toward him. "This was taken the night of the 15th. Ethan stared at it, the air thickening between them. "That doesn't prove anything," he muttered. Carla leaned forward. "It proves you were there. It proves she didn't lock herself in, and it proves you lied." Silence. The only sound was the faint buzz of the ceiling light and Ethan's breathing, uneven now. His mask was slipping. Carla tapped her pen against the table. "You know what I think? You didn't mean to kill her. Not at first. You just wanted control. You wanted her quiet." Ethan's head snapped up, his eyes, cold, wounded, locked on hers. "You think you understand?" His voice cracked for the first time. "You have no idea what she was like." "Then tell me," Carla said, her tone softening just enough. "Tell me what she was like." Ethan exhaled shakily, his fingers curling. "She made me feel small, like I was nothing. She'd smile at me, but I could see it. The disgust. I worked my whole life to build something for us, and she just laughed." Carla stayed silent, letting him unravel. "I didn't plan it," he continued, voice trembling. "It just happened. The fight got bad. She said she was leaving, taking everything. I couldn't let her do that. Not after everything I'd done for her." His hand rose to his face, trembling. "I just needed her to stop, to listen." "And so you put her in a freezer," Carla said quietly. Ethan's eyes glistened. "I thought she'd wake up. I thought she'd learn." Carla leaned in, her voice barely above a whisper. She did wake up, Ethan. She's alive. His breath caught. His pupils widened. That's impossible. She's at the hospital, Carla continued. She's talking. She remembers. He went pale. No, she can't. She told us what happened, Carla interrupted. She told us everything. Ethan pressed his hands to his temples, rocking slightly in his chair. You don't understand, he whispered. I didn't mean to. Carla reached forward and stopped the recording with a click. The red light went dark. You just confessed, she said evenly. You wanted her silence, and now the world will hear you. For a moment, the room felt frozen, the same stillness that had once filled the garage. Outside the glass, Ryan stood with Mrs. Keller, watching. He could see Ethan through the reflection, small, broken, stripped of the confidence that once filled his voice. Carla stood, gathering the files. We'll take it from here, she said, signaling the officers waiting outside. As they entered to escort him out, Ethan glanced once toward the mirror, toward Lena's unseen reflection on the other side of truth. His lips parted, a whisper escaping. She was supposed to be gone. Carla didn't answer. She turned off the light. The door closed with a final metallic click. The courtroom smelled faintly of old wood and coffee, a mix of nerves and order. Cameras weren't allowed, but the quiet hum of anticipation was electric. Every seat was filled. Reporters clutched notebooks. Neighbors leaned forward. Everyone wanted to see the man who had locked his wife in a freezer, and the woman who lived to tell it. Lena Moore sat at the witness stand, her hands trembling slightly against the polished wood. The scars on her wrists were faint now, pale reminders beneath the long sleeves of her blue dress. Her hair, shorter since the hospital, framed a face that had known both terror and resurrection. Across the room, Ethan sat in his suit, still, composed, unreadable. His eyes didn't move from her. For a moment it almost looked like affection. But Lena knew that look. It wasn't love. It was ownership, the ghost of what he once believed she was. The prosecutor, Martin Hale, stood beside her. Mrs. Moore, he said gently, can you tell the court what happened on the night of March 15th? Lena swallowed, her voice catching before it found strength. We fought. He told me I was ruining everything, that I made him look weak. She glanced toward Ethan, then away. Then I woke up cold. I thought I was dreaming. Her voice cracked, and the courtroom fell silent. I couldn't move, she continued, quieter now. It was dark. My skin hurt to touch. I realized I was inside the freezer. I screamed until my throat bled, but no one came. A juror wiped at her eye. I remembered his words before I blacked out, Lena whispered. He said, 5 days, enough to make you quiet. A murmur rippled through the room. Ethan's jaw tightened, but he didn't look away. Martin nodded solemnly. And yet, you survived. Lena nodded. Barely. But when I opened that lid, I wasn't the same person who'd gone in. Her tone hardened, trembling with both fear and fire. He thought he'd silence me. He thought he'd end me. But he doesn't understand. When you come that close to death, something in you changes. The defense attorney rose, voice cutting through. Objection. Emotional manipulation. The judge raised a hand. Overruled. Continue, Mrs. Moore. Lena turned her gaze fully on Ethan for the first time. The room seemed to narrow around them, just husband and wife, predator and survivor. Her next words were calm, deliberate, and cold. I didn't die, she said. You did. For a long moment, Ethan didn't move. Then his lips curled into something halfway between a smirk and a shiver, the mask breaking again. The jury saw it too. The charm, the arrogance, the flicker of something monstrous beneath. Martin Hale closed his folder slowly. No further questions. As Lena stepped down, she passed close enough to Ethan to hear him whisper, "You should have stayed quiet." She stopped, meeting his eyes one last time. "You should have stayed human." When she took her seat beside the prosecutor, Ryan gave her a small nod from the gallery, and Mrs. Keller squeezed her notebook against her chest, whispering a prayer. Ethan turned away as the judge announced recess, but behind the composure, something cracked. A tremor in his hand, a twitch in his jaw. For the first time, he looked afraid. Because the verdict wasn't just about prison, it was about truth. The house was quiet again. Too quiet. 5 days had passed since the trial, and the world outside still buzzed with headlines, debates, and the sound of strangers saying her name. But inside these walls, everything felt frozen in time, untouched, suspended. Lena stood in the doorway, holding her keys loosely in her hand. The living room looked exactly as she had left it. The overturned picture frame, the faint stain on the carpet, the scent of lemon cleaner still clinging to the air. For a long while, she didn't move. She just listened. To the hum of silence, to the whisper of her own breath. It was strange being back. This had once been her home, her safety. Then it became a cage. Now she wasn't sure what it was. The garage door creaked when she pushed it open. Dust motes floated in the sunlight. The police had taken what they needed, photos, fingerprints, evidence, but one thing remained. The freezer. It sat in the corner, the same dull white, now wrapped in yellow tape marked, "Evidence. Do not remove." The tape fluttered slightly from the open window, like a warning and a reminder all at once. Lena approached slowly. Her reflection wavered across the metal surface, pale and distant. She hesitated, her hand hovering above the latch. The memory surged, the sound of the lid closing, the air thinning, the darkness swallowing her whole. Her breathing quickened, but then she steadied herself. With a deliberate motion, she tore the tape away. The sound was sharp, final. The freezer lid creaked as she lifted it. A rush of cold air escaped, brushing her skin like a ghost's hand. She didn't step back. She stared into the empty space, the same void that had nearly taken her life, and yet, standing here now, it seemed smaller, weaker, powerless. Her voice was quiet, but steady. "You don't own me anymore." The words hung in the air, dissolving into the chill. She reached inside and set down the object she'd been carrying, Ethan's ring, encased in a clear evidence bag. She placed it gently on the metal bottom, then closed the lid. This time, she was the one who decided when it shut. Lena exhaled, the breath deep and cleansing. For the first time in months, she didn't feel afraid of the cold. She turned toward the sunlight spilling through the window and let it touch her face. Behind her, the freezer hummed softly. No longer a prison, just an object. Outside, a car door closed and footsteps approached. Ryan's voice called gently, "You ready?" Lena gave one last look at the freezer, then nodded. "Yeah," she said quietly. "Let's go." As she stepped outside, the sunlight hit her fully. Warm, alive, and blinding. Detective Carla Reyes stood outside the courthouse steps, the afternoon sun bleeding gold across the stone columns. Reporters shouted questions from a distance, their voices blending into a dull storm of noise. But she didn't answer any of them. She'd seen enough cameras, enough flash bulbs pretending to capture justice. Her voice came quietly, steady, reflective, the kind of tone that carried truth more than judgment. "Survival," she said in the voiceover that would later echo through a documentary reel, "is rarely clean." Ethan Moore had been convicted on all charges: attempted murder, unlawful imprisonment, evidence tampering. The jury had deliberated for less than 4 hours. When the verdict was read, he hadn't spoken. He just stared at the empty witness stand where Lena had once sat, his expression hollow, as if the world had finally shown him his reflection. But justice, Reyes knew, wasn't victory. It was aftermath. The news cycle spun for days. The freezer case, the wife who froze and lived, the husband who couldn't control the cold. The headlines were loud, the public was fascinated. Yet somewhere between the outrage and fascination, Lena Moore vanished. No interviews, no photos, no statements, just silence. Reyes had checked once, months later. Lena's house had been sold. The records showed a small rental in another state, under a different name. Somewhere warmer, perhaps. Somewhere without the sound of humming machines or the scent of frost. Some stories, Reyes continued in her narration, don't end when the case closes. They just melt into quiet. She turned and walked down the courthouse steps, the wind tugging at her coat. Her phone buzzed in her pocket. A message from evidence storage. One final note about a property auction. She opened it. Lot num 47. White chest freezer, model 1998A. Sold online. Lid slightly damaged. No contents. The photo, attached showed the freezer in an empty warehouse, sunlight slicing across its surface. The lid was cracked open an inch, as if something had once tried to escape. Reyes stared at the image for a long time before closing her phone. Some things, she murmured, should have stayed buried. The scene faded with her voice echoing softly. Cold remembers. It always does. And as the frame lingered on that image, the freezer waiting, patient, the hum returned, faint but unmistakable.